Okay, so tonight we have Grace presenting her master's student internship project on the effect of beach slope on the presence of Pismo clams. Okay, Grace.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to be talking about the effect of beach slip on the presence of Pismo clams. Um, so some background. So Pismo clam is once an iconic mollusk species found throughout the coast of California. It can be found from Stinson Beach, California to Magdalena Bay, Baja California. They inhabit sandy intertidal habitat and subtidal habitat in the open ocean. They bury themselves 2 to 3 inches deep in sand, and they are believed to favor gently sloped beaches. The Pismo clam fisheries in the U.S. has been going since the 19 ran from 1916 and reached a peak in 1918 at almost 700,000 landings, and then underwent a steady decline until its eventual closure in 1947. And the recreational fisheries for Pismo clams remains open today for a limit of 10 clams a day of legal size. Legal size of Pismo clams is 4.5 inches or larger south of the San Luis Obispo County line and 5 inches or larger north of the San Luis Obispo County line. And while the recreational fishery remains open today, there is a lack of legal size Pismo clams, and thus poaching remains relevant. Prevalent remains prevalent. Um, and our study looking into the slope and Pismo clam presence is part of a much larger project. Get Inspired works with Concordia University and Holdfast Aquaculture to close the life cycle of the Pismo clam, and together they have a shared goal of restoring Pismo clams in Orange County. So, um, Get Inspired is a community-based project surveying the Orange County coast for Pismo clams. Volunteers come and survey a section of the beach through the alongshore raking method. So through the alongshore raking method, volunteers survey parallel to the coastline or to the waterline and create a line perpendicular to the waterline. Get Inspired has conducted 60 of these arm surveys with a total of 1,068 clams found in 12 and a half miles of beach and with a density of 0.08 clams per meter squared. And out of all these clams found, only 36 are of legal size, which is 4.5 inches or larger south of the San Luis Obispo County line. We intend to survey from Seal Beach to Laguna Beach, and every beach, a sandy beach on this map has been surveyed um, for Pismo clams, except for the areas highlighted in yellow, which is Seal Beach, Sunset Beach, and Huntington Beach North. But this entire coastline will be completely surveyed within the next 2 years. So because of this intensive study, we have several questions. And our questions relate to where are Pismo clams most likely to be found. So some of our surveys, we find no clams, and other surveys, we find an abundance of clams. So one factor that can be playing into this is the slope of the beach. So we're also asking, are Pismo clams found on steeper or flatter beaches? And hopefully from these findings, we can also decide where should Pismo clam restoration efforts be implemented. So what is ideal habitat in Orange County to restore clams in? So why are we looking into slope of the beach? Um, Pismo clams are believed to favor gently sloped beaches, and in many beaches along the Orange County coast, sand berms are created to combat coastal erosion as a result of many things, including climate change and coastal development, which has resulted in climate change, which has resulted in sea level rise. And this creation of sand berms has also resulted in steeper beaches, and it is unknown how Pismo clams are affected by these modifications. So do steep slopes affect Pismo clam presence? To collect slope measurements on the beach, we collect them during arm surveys along the midpoint of each survey. So our first point taken is at the top of the berm, and our last point taken is in the middle of the line of rakers. And slope degree measurements are taken using a quadrat, um, and a slope degree is taken at each of these points. And each point is mapped with a GPS coordinate. And so the area encompassed is from the top of the burn all the way to the middle of the line of rakers. And to depict this more visually, you can see it through the orange points, which starts at the top of the berm and goes to the middle of the line of rakers at the midway of the arm survey. So since we only get slope degrees in the field, we are calculating a relative slope value for the entire beach. We calculated a relative slope value for each beach through taking the highest slope, which is the slope at the top of the berm, minus the lowest slope, which is the slope in the middle of the line of rakers. We divide it by 100 and we multiply it by the beach length, which is perpendicular to the water line. And our RSVs for each of our surveys ranges from -2 to 16 for 44 surveyed beaches. So out of these 44 surveyed beaches that had an RSV that ranged from -2 to 16, our average RSV was 4.75, and 36% of beaches were above this RSV of 4.75, and 64% had a slope under the average RSV. And then independent of RSV, of the 44 surveyed beaches, 59% of beaches had at least one clam present, and 41% of beaches had no clams. And then of beaches with an equal or higher average RSV, um, 69% of those beaches that had a higher than average RSV had a clam present, and 31% had no clams. And then on the flip side, beaches with a lower than average RSV, so this is 4.75 value, 54% of those beaches had at least one clam present, and 46% of them had no clams. So we ran a Spearman's correlation test to determine the relationship between relative slope value and Pismo clam abundance. And within the beaches surveyed along the Orange County coast, Pismo clam abundance was not found to be correlated with relative slope. And you can see that in our rho value of 0.125 and our p-value of 0.42 in the 44 beaches surveyed. And this can be visualized in our graph depicting the relative slope value and the total clams, separated by beaches surveyed by color, and it's pretty random, and there's no relationship. But if you were to look at the surveys along the coast, so this starts from Bolsa Chica at the north, depicted on the left, and Laguna Beach, which is the most south, depicted on the right. So this is like if you were looking at the coastline and all the beaches, the relative slope value fluctuates. No beach is only low slope and no beach is only high slope. And the red line depicts our mean RSV. And then if you graph RSV with total clams, you can see these fluctuations and the lack of relationship between the two. So RSV is depicted in the purple bars and total clams in the blue line. So moving forward, for one, this is the first comprehensive baseline study of slope and its effect on Pismo clams. And we hope that people are able to build off of this when studying slope for clams. And we hope to make this data available to cities and resource managers for future decisions, especially when it comes to the creation of sandberms and for beach maintenance. And we also want to look in how slope affects subtidal clam populations. So we only studied intertidal clam populations, and even if intertidal clam populations are absent, it doesn't necessarily mean that subtidal clam populations will be. So is there any relationship between the slope um, that kind of disappears when you move into the subtidal? And then there are stories about Pismo clams in North Newport going back to the 60s and the 70s. And there are lots of reasons for why Pismo clams may be absent now. Um, some people say that Pismo clams, or clamming for Pismo clams, wasn't worth it after the 1983 El Nino event. And it is possible that this is what resulted in beach nourishment. And our recent El Nino events can also be having an effect on the amounts of clams present. So going off of that, it's also possible that density of clams is affecting our results. So a 1991 study found that clam densities in Bolsa Chica and through Huntington Beach, were about 1.32 clams per meter squared. But a more recent study found there to be a mean of zero point 0.5 clams per meter squared throughout the entire Orange County coastline, and Huntington Beach to have a 0 to zero point 0.1 clam per meter squared. So this low density of clams across Orange County can be affecting our results. And considering that 41% of our beaches surveyed had no clams, it's possible that densities of clams are just too low in Orange County to correlate to the slope of the beach. And both of these highlights the need for Pismo clam restoration in Orange County. So that is our project. And thank you to John Phibbs, Dan Clinane, and the over 300 volunteers at Get Inspired that helped collect this data and make this work possible. And then for more information, or if you have any questions, you can contact Nancy. And thank you, Get Inspired, for the opportunity to do this internship.